intelligence that his uncle was murdered, and that he was appointed his heir, he hesitated for some time whether he should call to his aid the legions stationed in the neighborhood, but he abandoned the design as rash and premature. However, returning to Rome, he took possession of his inheritance, although his mother was apprehensive that such a measure might be attended with danger, and his stepfather, Marcus Philippus, a man of consular rank, very earnestly dissuaded him from it. From this time, collecting together a strong military force, he first held the government in conjunction with Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus, then with Antony only, for nearly 12 years, and at last in his own hands during a period of 44. Having thus given a very short summary of his life, I shall prosecute the several parts of it, not in order of time, but arranging his acts into distinct classes for the sake of perspicuity. He was engaged in 5 civil wars, namely those of Modena, Philippi, Perugia, Sicily, and Actium, the first and last of which were against Antony, the second against Brutus and Cassius, the third against Lucius Antonius, the triumvir's brother, and the fourth against Sextus Pompeius, the son of Cnaeus Pompeius. The motive which gave rise to all these wars was the opinion he entertained that both his honor and interest were concerned in revenging the murder of his uncle, and maintaining the state of affairs he had established. Immediately after his return from Apollonia, he formed the design of taking forcible and unexpected measures against Brutus and Cassius; but they having foreseen the danger and made their escape, he resolved to proceed against them by an appeal to the laws in their absence, and impeach them for the murder. In the meantime, those whose province it was to prepare the sports in honor of Caesar's last victory in the civil war, not daring to do it, he undertook it himself; and that he might carry into effect his other designs with greater authority, he declared himself a candidate in the room of a tribune of the people, who happened to die at that time, although he was of a patrician family, and had not yet been in the senate. But the consul, Mark Antony, from whom he had expected the greatest assistance, opposing him in his suit, and even refusing to do him so much as common justice, unless gratified with a large bribe, he went over to the party of the nobles, to whom he perceived Sulla to be odious, chiefly for endeavoring to drive Decius Brutus, whom he had besieged in the town of Modena, out of the province, which had been given him by Caesar, and confirmed to him by the senate, at the instigation of persons about him, and he engaged some ruffians to murder his antagonist; but the plot being discovered, and dreading a similar attempt upon himself, he gained over Caesar's veteran soldiers, by distributing among them all the money he could collect. Being now commissioned by the senate to command the troops he had gathered, with the rank of praetor, and in conjunction with Hortius and Pansa, who had accepted the consulship, to carry the assistance to Decius Brutus, he put an end to the war by 2 battles in 3 months. Antony writes that in the former of these he ran away, and 2 days afterwards made his appearance, without his general's cloak and his horse. In the last battle, however, it is certain that he performed the part not only of a general but a soldier, for in the heat of battle, when the standard-bearer of his legion was severely wounded, he took the eagle upon his shoulders and carried it a long time. In this war, Hirtius being slain in battle, and Pansa dying a short time afterwards of a wound, a report was circulated that they both were killed through his means, in order that, when Antony fled, the republic having lost its consuls, he might have the victorious armies entirely at his own command. The death of Pansa was so fully believed to have been caused by undue means, that Glyco, his surgeon, was placed in custody, on a suspicion of having poisoned his wound; and to this Aquilius Niger adds, that he killed Hirtius, the other consul, in the confusion of the battle, with his own hands. But upon intelligence that Antony, after his defeat, had been received by Marcus Lepidus, and the rest of the generals and armies had all declared for the senate, he, without any hesitation, deserted from the party of the nobles, alleging as an excuse for his conduct the actions and sayings of several amongst them, for some said he was a mere boy. Others threw out that he ought to be promoted to honors and cut off, to avoid making any suitable acknowledgment either to him or to the veteran legions. And the more to testify his regret for having before attached himself to the other faction, he fined the Nursini in a large sum of money, which they were unable to pay, and then expelled them from the town, for having inscribed upon a monument erected at the public charge to their countrymen who were slain in the battle of Modena, that they all fell in the cause of liberty. Having entered into a conference with Antony and Lepidus, he brought the war at Philippi to an end in 2 battles, although he was at that time weak and suffering from sickness. In the first battle he was driven from his camp, and with some difficulty made his escape to the wing of the army commanded by Antony. And now, intoxicated with success, he sent the head of Brutus to be cast at the floor of Caesar's statue, and treated the most illustrious of the prisoners not only with cruelty, but with abusive language, insomuch as he is said to have answered one of them, who humbly entreated that at least he might not remain unburied, "That will be in the power of the birds." 2 others, father and son, who begged for their lives, he ordered to cast lots, which of them should live, or to settle it between themselves by the sword, and was the spectator of both their deaths; for the father offering his life to save his son, and being accordingly executed, the son likewise killed himself upon the spot. On this account the rest of the prisoners, and among them Marcus Favonius, Cato's rival, being led up in fetters, after they had saluted Antony, the general, with much respect, reviled Octavius in the foulest language. After this victory, dividing between them the offices of the state, Mark Antony undertook to restore the order in the East, while Caesar conducted the veteran soldiers back to Italy, and settled them in colonies on the lands belonging to the municipalities. But he had the misfortune to please neither the soldiers nor the owners of the lands, one party complaining of the injustice done them in being violently ejected from their possessions, and the other that they were not rewarded according to their merit. At this time he obliged Lucius Antony, who, presuming upon his own authority as consul and his brother's power, was raising new commotions, to fly to Perugia, and forced him by famine to surrender at last, although not without having been exposed to great hazards both before the war and during its continuance. For a common soldier having got into the seats of the equestrian order and the theatre, at the public spectacles, Caesar ordered him to be removed by an officer, and a rumor being thus spread by his enemies that he had put the man to death by torture, the soldiers flocked together, so much enraged that he narrowly escaped with his life. The only thing that saved him was the sudden appearance of the man, safe and sound, no violence having been offered him; and whilst he was sacrificing under the walls of Perugia, he nearly fell into the hands of a body of gladiators who sallied out of the town. After taking Perugia, he sentenced a great number of prisoners to death, making only one reply to all who implored pardon, or endeavored to excuse themselves: "You must die." Some authors write that 300 of the 2 orders, selected from the rest, were slaughtered like victims before an altar raised to Julius Caesar upon the Ides of March. Nay, there are some who relate that he entered upon the war with no other view than that his secret enemies, and those whom fear more than affection kept quiet, might be detected by declaring themselves, now that they had an opportunity, with Lucius Antony at their head, and that having defeated them and confiscated their estates, he might be enabled to fulfill his promises to the veteran soldiers. He soon commenced the Sicilian war, but it was protracted by various delays during a long period; at one time for the purpose of repairing his fleets, which he twice lost by storm even in the summer; at another while patching up a peace, to which he was forced by the clamors of the people, in consequence of a famine occasioned by Pompey's cutting off the supply of corn by sea. But at last, having built a new fleet, and obtained 20,000 manumitted slaves, who were given him for the oar, he formed the Julian harbor at Baiae, by letting the sea into the Lucrine and Avernian lakes; and having exercised his forces there during the whole winter, he defeated Pompey betwixt Mylae and Naubolus, although, just as the engagement commenced, he suddenly fell into such a profound sleep that his friends were obliged to wake him to give the signal. This, I suppose, gave occasion for Antony's reproach: "You were not better able to take a clear view of the fleet when drawn up in line of battle, but lay stupidly upon your back, gazing up at the sky; nor did you get up and let your men see you until Marcus Agrippa had forced the enemy's ships to sheer off." Others imputed to him both a saying and an action, which were indefensible; for upon the loss of his fleets by storm he is reported to have said, I will conquer in spite of Neptune. And at the